As an athlete, when I started, I had no talent. All the testing I've had, race results, was all really average. So here, I'm going to explain to you what I think is possible to qualify for Kona without talent. I've had a look online. I've done a video on how I qualified on 10 to 12 hours a week before. However, I thought about it, and people ask me a lot of the time, what's the best route? And if you search on YouTube, I'm sure you'll find a few videos around this topic, but nothing around the idea around talent. So it led me to the story of telling how I managed to qualify for Kona after years of training and involvement. So I'm going to tell you the pain, the perseverance, the passion, and the profession around some concepts that I think will be the how, and try build a framework. Are you interested? You're in the right place. Listen in, book a call if you're interested in chatting about this prospect. Talent, no talent. All right, so you've got to think big, all right? Now, that whole classic analogy of shooting for the stars, you've got to really, you can't put yourself in a box. I found this personally. Yes, I aspired to Olympians. I aspired to the elite looking triathletes. When I started back in South Africa, I was 19, 20 years old. I'm 46 now, at the beginning of February 2025. And I looked up to these elite looking high level athletes, and there was only a small pool of people, but really pretty decent level. It was the Conrad Stoltz era when he moved across to Xterra and became world champion multiple times. Google him, he's a bit of a machine. It was that era. And myself and a good close friend, Brad, who was kind of earmarked for the Olympics for pre-Sydney, never made the national team, but he was a high-level junior. That brought on a sense of perseverance and this high, big dream of becoming an athlete. Now, what does that represent? Well, I had no idea that 26 years later, I'd be sitting here doing a video and actually made my life into coaching, 15 to 20 years of helping other endurance athletes not necessarily pursue the dream of qualifying for Kona, but actually working out what's at triathlon as the vehicle, what's the best that they can achieve. And I think it's limitless, and it is a vehicle for health, longevity. You can get so much benefit out of it. And the most important thing is showing your kids through a multidisciplinary, fun way of training, non-repetitive, for example, running, non-competitive, just cycling, just multifactorial. Let's not even bring in the nutrition. So I wanted to share my story with you. First thing, you got to make sure you fail and fail a lot. Okay, you hear this in recent podcasts now that are so easily accessible. Again, we didn't have this 10 years ago, but in business mainly, if you don't fail, you'll never make it. Now, what do I mean by that? It could be failing just to qualify, so enter a race, try qualify for Hawaii. It's not as simple as that. You can get really fit and try and chase a time. I'm talking about more failing with the training, big setbacks, ideally not injury, but following a protocol of training, whether it's with a coach, myself, or a training plan, or doing too much or way too little. Just go to the point where you get major setbacks, because from that, the growth is impeccable. Okay, so it's a little bit deep, I know, but this is the main thing, especially for youngsters in their 20s listening to this. You won't want to fail. You want to shoot straight to the stars, and that is not how you do it. We know that endurance comes on year upon year, and you hear of guys and girls that friends that qualify in the first year or two. I've coached a couple of people that by accident qualified, a female especially, and that was a great process, and it was the one and done, and she went and experienced it, and it was just a nice long day out. I've had people that have chased it for years and it just fell on their lap after 2 or 3 years of trying. Currently, I'm helping a Kona Dream project. You can follow it in other episodes. And it's a 1.5 to 2 year plan to try and build up from the basics, leaving no stone unturned, testing, following a strategy process, and of course, all the smaller details that I've learned over 15, 20 years of racing and applying it to this athlete. Okay, so the key thing is to surround yourself, I find, these are all my opinions, so with the best. Okay, now that could be your environment that you train in, which you actually outgrow every year. For example, not blowing my own trumpet at all, I have a nice group of people, they become super good mates, and when you're in a pool, you can swim with anyone really, because you either just go for different send-offs, so you're all in a small 25 meter or 50 meter area, and it's quite nice to suffer. And swimming is one of those things you always need someone a little bit better. Running, I could never really run with anyone unless it was short repeats or a track, but because your easy runs are always too hard or they're not hard enough, you really got to understand where you are and what it means to you to develop certain areas of your training and your physiology. But this evolves. Now, this is what I didn't realize. Okay, so this evolves every year because you start as a beginner, then you get a little bit better after just training, just being out there day in, day out. The year after, a lot of those people have dropped off, say 50%, and you just need to keep evolving yourself, all right, because this feeds back into this big dream. So we're going with no talent. We are assuming that there isn't amazing physiology. What I mean by talent, like you've been earmarked by your federation, you've been streamlined into big VO2 max, you've got a swimming background, or in terms of this country, certainly in the UK, it's if you can swim really fast, under 5 minutes, and you can run around 16 minutes in a 5K, you get drawn into the program as a junior. And the idea is you get in the system of the lottery funding and you get into the ITU world. But it's different now. There's a professional Ironman series, there's PTO, there's decent money to be made. So there's young 20-year-olds looking up to become a pro, and there's age groupers that want to go to Kona. Okay, now I've coached quite a lot of people to get to that place. Most of the people just want to do an Ironman. That's 75% of my athletes. And occasionally we get some top age groupers. And then I've also consulted for professionals, Maurice Clavel being one of them. We certainly looked at his nutrition and hydration. That was 2020 through COVID. And then of course, actually it started in 2019, start of COVID. And then his career has plateaued due to various life things, but he has always had some coaching direction. But I had a bit of input, certainly in the early years, mainly as a chatting, and I believed he could actually podium in Hawaii when he was on his top of his game. Next thing is to make sure, and this is something I never did, that training is fun. It's quite a sweeping statement. And 80% of the time, you don't really enjoy the sessions. They're brutal, especially if you want to try evolve and become good, very good. But fun meaning it's a cross-training type of fun. It's something without a watch. It's mountain biking instead of road biking. It's just mucky fun in the mud. I think that is key. And that's the area that I didn't do in my 20s, was making things super fun. I mean, don't get me wrong, I had some good parties after races. I had some good times with mates, but I think that's something I've learned only now, and that comes with a little bit of age. I am still competing, and I've just slowed down with the Ironmans to give the body a break, and I might revisit that. You got to know that it might take 2, 3, or 4 years, and then boom. So what does that mean? 2 years of continuous training. If it's 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours a week, yes. You ask any very experienced physiologist, coaches that understand endurance. You have certain genetics that were given to you, then you have a background as a child, and then you have the repetition. That year upon year, that repetition, that's what builds the engine. That's what makes these 10,000 hours, 10 years to get to this amazing Olympic athlete. It was all the stuff you didn't see, all the failing, all the change of coaches, all the injuries, and most importantly, that repetition. If you're not prepared for that 2, 3, 4 year commitment and you just want to feel like you want to do it for the year and see what happens, tune out now. This is about trying to get to this big dream without some sort of historic talent that you feel you've been told you have, you've been tested, etc., etc. Otherwise, stay tuned. All right. The next thing you want to do is tell a close friend, tell one person, a partner. As soon as you verbalize it, it can be a family member. As soon as you verbalize that you want to do something, it kicks in an actual reality. It's one thing to say, I want to be rich. I don't know, it's one thing I want to travel across the world on a bicycle, but you've actually not planned the whole route out. You've not started the process. You've not actually spoken about it. That's the biggest thing I find. Once you verbalize, it locks you in. Now, it doesn't have to be this year. And actually, what most people are worried about, and I've been here, and it's what if you don't? Now, this is what I told my athlete that's doing the journey with me in the Kona project. What if you don't qualify? And actually, no one actually cares, but we think they care and they'll judge us. That's self-reflective. If you do not worry about actually who cares and actually reflect on the important part of it, and it's the whole process and what you'll gain out of doing this, suddenly the pressure is completely off. It's remarkable, and that took me years to understand. All right, so that's the intro. Hopefully I've got you a little bit intrigued. All right, I'm going to try dive into a little bit of context now, another layer, just to try and map it out. That's given you a little bit of my subjective views as a coach, as an athlete, and as someone that's reflecting the last, I suppose, 10 years of triathlon and how it's evolved. So stick around, all right? There's lots of material online in books around the nurturing, talent being nurtured, the 10,000 hour, the genetics, the repetition, the 10 years. That's where that sort of came from, the 10,000 hours, where we roughly can do 1,000 hours of training a year. I've read a book called Bounce, Matthew Syed. That goes into a little bit of that around the 10,000 hour rule. It's a combination of all of them, I think. It's genetics play a role, for sure. Talent, small percentage. Of course, that helps because of it from genetics. That's linked, but a lot of it is this. It's picking a race. It's turning up when some people have bad luck. We all have mechanicals. We all have sickness in the race week. I can tell you countless times where I've turned up to a race, been completely overwhelmed by looking at an athlete. This is in my early 20s. Super good fitness, muscly, tanned, certainly in South Africa, beautiful bikes. They've always done the sprint series, done really well. And suddenly, scraggly me with an old bike and hogwashing some training together, no structure, and beating them. Coming out of the water pretty much close to last. I'm sure you can resonate with that. Most triathletes do. Have come from a weak swim background, and then building your way up and then running past people. I think that is just the most amazing thing. So whether it was those genetics, that was probably the fact that I just plugged away week in, week out, because I absolutely loved it. I think the key thing is to not get penned into one area, as in don't spend Don't spend too much time thinking, is it genetics? Is it luck? Is it the 10,000 rule? I think if you just keep plugging away, turning up, that's what I tell my elite athletes, just keep turning up. Keep some in reserve. I did sport growing up in South Africa. As a kid, I never got picked for top teams. I was always picked up last. I never got the swim squads. They never picked me for polo because I was terrible. I messed about biking for sure. Every day after school, I was average, so I had no strength. I couldn't push out high power numbers. We didn't even have power then, but it all started there. It was the passion. And I think that was laying down the foundations, well, of course it was, of an early years. Now that goes back to the 10,000 hours. I know, I agree, that's what you're thinking. But that's where the passion came from. If you don't have that background, I can resonate with you. I have coached people that in their 20s and 30s, certainly growing up in this country, in the UK, don't have that inbred sport nature that Australia have, New Zealand, South Africa, and obviously parts of the UK as well. It's just the weather is not great. So what did I do? So I think my only regret in my 20s, and that's when I started racing, was not doing anywhere enough intensity. Proper hard efforts. Above 3 minutes. I just don't think I actually knew what intensity meant. Okay, that was my only regret in my 20s. I raced a lot. I got to travel, came to the UK, I went to Australia, but I was a bit scared of hurting. If I had been given those tools in my toolbox and the knowledge that I learned in my 30s, mid-30s, it could have been a whole different ballgame. So if you're in your 20s, that's probably the best bit of advice I can give you. What I was doing was building a massive engine, aerobic, and you can't undo that. That is just time. But with repetition, I was building up a massive engine with repetition and loads of hours, because I just loved going on 5-hour rides and 2-hour runs and just doing probably overtraining. Okay. So it's great, you get away with murder in your 20s, you're pretty injury-free because your body has elasticity. But if you are in your 20s, I would say save the long stuff. If you're early 20s, if you're sort of 25 to 30, you can start thinking about going long. It is quite early, but who am I to say that it's too young? People are starting younger because there is a very good professional scene now in the Ironman. But wait 18 to 24 months, I would, before you start to go long, okay? Your body just needs time. Tendon, ligament, muscle conditioning, just build up slowly. Don't rush straight into hero to zero, or zero to hero, should I say, because you can become hero to zero in 5 minutes. So that pays dividends, guys. Really just be patient. Okay, it's not what you want to hear right now, but I'm only talking about 18 to 24 months. Remember, we spoke about 3 or 4 years. Hold that thought process, because we're going to move into your 30s. Moving into your 30s, we've got time still. You know, you can qualify into your 40s and 50s, 60s if you really want to. We've got time. We're stronger now if you've been doing it in your 20s. If you haven't, if you just started in your 30s, you're definitely stronger as an individual, as an endurance athlete, if you've been doing some work in the previous years. I would definitely understand your physiology. Spend the money working with a physiologist on getting your bike lab testing done. Probably only need to do it once or twice a year. The investment is huge. It's not just about getting a protocol lab result test. It's about understanding your development. Okay, if you can, that's the best advice I can give you in your 30s. In your 20s, you're just doing repetition, building endurance, and having lots of fun. If you think you have something in you, by all means, get tested in your 20s. Okay, now you might be in your 40s and waiting patiently, listening on the video. Okay, most important thing in life yes, in life, you've got experience. Now that pays dividends. Time management, I was absolutely useless. Still trying to improve that. On time management in my 30s, certainly before in my 20s. Okay, so you understand how to juggle life, work, I suppose kids. If you're in your 40s, you probably more than likely have kids. That's the biggest thing. You actually get more training done because you are so good at time management. You always hear, certainly my partner says, ask a busy person to get something done, ask a busy female to get something done, and they get it done. And also, most importantly, your ego. You spend your 20s trying to prove to people, and probably into your 30s. By the time you get to your 40s, certainly that was the case with me, you actually don't care. You spend most of the time now trying to not care about what people think about you. And this is key, okay? Because as soon as your ego is left at the front door, before you go inside, it opens up a whole new way of thinking about how you approach each session. No hero sessions. When you're in your 20s and 30s, you just want to do these hero sessions because you heard about a 6-hour ride and a 2-hour run off the bike. I've done those. Massive hero session. I was floored for a couple of days, but just thought that was part of it. But that's not what you want, okay? You want to leave that whole ego behind. I think that's really, really crucial to understand. So there's 30s and 40s. 50s and 60s. Next. Okay, so you're in your 50s now. Yes, things are slowing down. You're not old. I hate that. People are starting to mutter to me at 46, oh, the body's giving. No, I'm not going to have it. Until you pretty much using a wheelchair or a walker to assist you, you can still crack on. So what we've got in our 50s, you might be a lifetime athlete. Now that means you've been doing sport all through your life, 30s, 40s, not competitively, just you're a lifetime athlete, okay? It just took you a few years to take up triathlon. I've got a few athletes that only took it up in the late 40s. So we've got a few parameters that we need to fulfill. We need to decrease the decline of the VO2 max. Now it is on the decline from about 35. You don't use it, you lose it. Maximal volume of uptake of oxygen. Okay, now you can do it by sprinting up hills, climbing mountains, doing intervals on a bike, in a pool, anything that takes you way above your threshold and limits the amount of oxygen you can use. So it's normally repeats of around 3 to 5 minutes. Okay, now you can lose it as fast as you can maintain it, but you can slow down the decline. Okay, and that's the most important thing. You don't want to completely follow the trend of this through there. Now you can maintain by doing strength, weights, of course, 3 to 5 minute intervals. Now this doesn't need to be running because running is very high stress. You need to just train really smart as well. Longer recovery between harder sessions, probably 3 to 5 days, not your classic 1 day on, 1 day off. And the most important thing in our 50s is day in, day out consistency, because that'll decline that. That'll slow down, that'll slow down the decline of VO2 max. Okay. So you can still qualify in your 50s, and it's very competitive, around 10 hours for a flat course. So you can't be starting with a low end. I've had a couple of people in their 50s, we've improved their VO2 max, but that's mainly just from stimulus where they started as a low baseline. 60s, all right, I've got 160s that I coach, 68, 69, and one that I actually swim with who's 69, turning 70 in October. He still bashes out 50s in 32 seconds in the pool. So you got to find what's working well for you. Okay, you're now entering an age where you're in the minority against your peers, your friends, your age group. Remember, you're comparing to people in your age group, okay? You can still be a lifetime athlete and still go to Hawaii and still, you might have only started when you're 55. Think about it. If it's someone you know, a friend, your father, who's in their 60s and they love training and triathlon, this might be something they can relate to. I think you need to really capitalize on your strengths. Okay, what does that mean? So you might have years and years of biking socially. That is a strength. You have technique, you have natural ability to handle the bike. That's huge. You lose minutes and minutes on a down or descent with wind, for example, in an Ironman course. You want to basically not get injured. Now, that might be the rule of thumb for all of the age groups, but unfortunately, the loss of elasticity, the range of motion, ROM, of your shoulder girdle, your hip, and your ankle leads to tightness. So the goal is to remain consistent, which means do not get injured. Of course, illness comes and goes, and unfortunately things that you can't prevent. If you can keep the consistency that you kept up in your 50s, you will just overtake people in your in your age bracket because you've just kept it going. There's no magic sauce. You just have to try and, I would probably take 1 to 3, I'm not going to say 1 to 2 days, rest per week. You're not going to like that. And you definitely need to do 3 times a week weights. Okay, because we want to keep the strength and the elasticity of the muscles and tendons. So if it means dropping a endurance session, you've got all your years before of doing endurance. Why do we need to do more? You can't do very high intensity. You could probably do that in the pool and of course on the bike, but I would definitely not do high intensity running. I would run up hills, speed work in disguise, another chapter. So you can see how that feeds back into, there's no secret sauce, but it just gives you a little bit of idea. Now, this is me reflecting after 20 years of coaching and having started the journey and not really knowing what I was doing in my 20s. I had 2 coaches, then I had 2 coaches in my 30s that I learned quite a lot from. And then I've been self-coached with the help from physiologists and some really good key people along the way. And I just keep learning more. I'm always reading CBD work, doing more courses. And with that, with the sports science background, you learn how to really get the best out of a human. And I think that's what you guys really want to know. Let's summarize that. In summary, I think, am I spelling? Commitment. Okay. There's going to be some family commitment stuff there. There is going to be work. Don't try and do it when you are traveling around the world constantly and it just stresses you out trying to fit in these sessions, this fit in and this catch up on the weekend. I've had countless athletes trying to catch up on Saturday and Sunday. They get to Monday and of course they fail Monday, and it's the busiest day of the week with meetings. Really commit. Now, is it 8? Is it 10 hours? Is it 12 to 14? Whatever you commit to, make it work. And just understand whether you employ a coach for consulting or have them full time to take the guesswork out of it. I think if you can really commit to, that's obviously the training. Okay. I would really get some true baseline testing. Now, what that can do is, of course, tell you what your numbers are, for example, but find out where we are and what actually percentage you're using of your VO2 max on the bike and run. Don't worry too much about the swim. It's such a small element and it's much harder to test. Because if you are only utilizing, as I just tested someone recently, about 68, 69% of your VO2 max for your steady rides, there's so much more development there, no matter what your age is. Okay, get some baseline testing and reassess. That's really what you want to do. And play the long game. Speak to as many experienced people. Book a call with me. I'm not going to charge you about this process. Like, you've got the dream. You think you know the road. You can afford a coach, or you can afford some baseline testing. And you can afford this to give that. We've all got to work, unless you're on the lottery or you're in your 50s and you're actually semi-retired, which I have worked with people on that front. And this is the most important thing, because this is your support. Believe me, I was single for many years. I threw myself into more Ironman training. But ultimately, if you don't really have that, life becomes kind of one-dimensional. And it comes back to that fun element. And you're much better off missing some sessions and having a glass of wine, going out with your partner, going out with friends, and just having a laugh, because the mental aspect about turning up the next day, that is overlooked, and you just don't get that in your training plan. It doesn't tell you on Training Peaks it tells you to have a rest day, but maybe to go out and absolutely remove yourself for 2 days, go and hike, go have some really nice meals, and do some wake surfing, for example. Something I do every now and then. You know, I surf, but not very regularly. But for example, go do something completely different, behind a boat, get towed, and just go on a wake. And it's just, things like that are just worth its weight in gold. If you're still interested in this whole journey, watch some of my previous videos as well. It'll help give you a little bit of structure to maybe where you're thinking. But I hope you enjoy that. Feel free to leave some comments, follow, drop me a message, whatever works. And thanks for listening this far.